When Jimmy Fallon asks Jimin the impossible, Taehyung or Jungkook, his raw, unexpected answer stuns the world and shakes the BTS fandom forever. Taehyung or Jungkook, who do you trust more? Jimmy's voice cut through the silence like a blade through silk, casual yet calculated, smiling as if he didn't just ignite a firestorm. The studio lights beamed down like interrogation lamps, magnifying the tension that suddenly crawled across the velvet walls of the Tonight Show set. The laughter died. The air grew heavier. Jimin blinked. Jungkook, seated to Jimin's left, shifted almost imperceptibly. His fingers curled against the black slacks that still had the creases from the stylist's iron. His jaw twitched. Across the line of chairs, Taehyung gave a slow blink, his eyes unreadable beneath the glint of layered gold and navy blue shadows. Jimin exhaled softly, just once, but it was all it took to silence the entire room. That one breath was louder than any applause had been just minutes before. The moment had arrived, not one their team pre-approved, not in the teleprompter, not filtered through layers of PR caution. This was Jimmy Fallon uncaged, and Jimin somehow looked like he'd seen it coming. The cameras rolled, but nobody was watching the monitor. Jimin leaned forward, hands clasped, elbows digging into his thighs as if anchoring himself in that chair. His voice, when it came, wasn't soft, it was raw, scratched, like something had clawed its way through his throat to be spoken. "You're asking me to betray one of them in front of the world." A hush blanketed the set. No one had breath since he did. Jimmy offered a half laugh, trying to backpedal the energy. No betrayal, just a fun little. Jimin interrupted, "It's never just when it's about them." He looked at Jungkook, held that gaze like it was something sacred and dangerous, then turned to Taehyung. And for the first time that night, his eyes shimmered with something closer to apology than emotion. And still, he did not answer. Not yet. Earlier that week, no one in the BTS world expected an American talk show to become the stage for the unraveling of years of unseen tension. Fans had waited years for another joint appearance like this. The reunion on-screen was supposed to be celebratory, a moment of lightness in a world that had grown too heavy with solo projects, military service whispers, and personal distance. But something had changed. Jimin had arrived at the studio late that day, not because he overslept, because the night before he hadn't slept at all. He'd spent hours staring at the edge of his hotel window, watching the glow of Times Square flicker like a nervous heartbeat. His mind was a storm full of eyes, two pairs in particular, one that used to look at him with innocence and one that used to look at him with fire. There was something Jimin hadn't said, not to the staff, not to the stylists, not even to himself aloud, something that burned in his chest every time the three of them were in the same room. He was afraid not of the cameras, the question, or the consequence, but of the answer. Because he already knew it. And once spoken, it could never be taken back. Back on stage, Jimmy sensed the weight of the silence growing unbearable. He tried to pivot. Okay, maybe I went too far. But Jimin finally spoke. "If I had to choose, based only on trust, not love, not history, not even memories." Jungkook didn't blink. Taehyung swallowed something invisible, something jagged. Jimin's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Then I would say Jungkook." No one moved, no one made a sound. Not even Jimmy. He might have expected fanservice, a joke, a clever sidestep. But not this, not the trembling in Jimin's fingers, not the way Jungkook's expression didn't shift into pride or glee, but into guilt, heavy, visible, like he wished the answer had been someone else. Taehyung didn't speak, he didn't leave, he didn't laugh, he just nodded once slowly and smiled, a crooked, unreadable smile that said more than words ever could. The studio lights didn't flicker. But in that moment, something broke. And something else began. 3 hours after the show ended, Jimin stood alone in the dressing room, staring at his reflection as though it had become a stranger overnight. The room was quiet except for the distant hum of stage crews packing up the remnants of laughter and awkward applause. On the vanity table sat his untouched water bottle, a script with penciled notes, and a photograph folded in half, one corner revealing Taehyung's smile, the other Jungkook's closed eyes. He hadn't meant for it to come out like that. He hadn't rehearsed it. But he hadn't lied either. He looked at himself again and said aloud, "I should have kept my mouth shut." The words didn't echo, but they felt heavy enough to shake the walls. Across the hallway, Jungkook wasn't celebrating. He wasn't scrolling through fan reactions or texting the staff about the next schedule. He was sitting on the carpet of his own dressing room, back against the wall, head tilted up like he was trying to see something beyond the ceiling, something ancient, invisible, or divine. He wasn't happy Jimin had said his name. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like betrayal wearing a crown. Because trust, when placed in your hands in front of millions of people, doesn't feel like an honor, it feels like a weight, and he knew that weight too well. The last time Jimin had said, "I trust you," it had been in the hallway of a hotel in Tokyo years ago when things were breaking silently behind the cameras. Jungkook had held that sentence like a fragile flame, then he'd made a decision, a mistake that nearly snuffed it out for good. So why had Jimin said his name again? Why now? Taehyung, meanwhile, had vanished after the show. No staff had seen him leave. No van was scheduled for him. He didn't answer texts, not even from Namjoon, who had been watching the interview from Seoul with a growing pit in his stomach. Taehyung had always been unreadable, but never unreachable. Until tonight. Instead, he walked the length of the Brooklyn Bridge alone, hood pulled up, breathing in the sharp wind as if it could strip the moment from his skin. He wasn't angry. Not like people would expect. What he felt couldn't be captured by something so small. What he felt was a sadness so deep it didn't have edges, because Jimin had answered honestly and Taehyung wasn't the one he trusted most. And yet, somehow he already knew that. The real surprise was Jimin's answer. It was how much it still hurt. Later that night, Jimin's hotel suite was filled with silence. He didn't turn on the lights. He stood by the window, the cityscape flickering below like blinking warnings. The air was cold, still, but something inside him was louder than ever. There was a knock. Not loud, not urgent. But the rhythm was familiar. Jimin opened the door. Jungkook stood there wearing a black hoodie, cap pulled low, eyes barely visible. "I'm not here to talk," Jungkook said. I needed to see if you're okay." Jimin didn't answer, he stepped aside. Jungkook walked in, stood in the center of the room as though walking into a memory. They didn't speak for a long time. Jungkook finally sat on the edge of the couch looking at the floor. "You know what that question did, right?" Jimin nodded. "I wasn't ready for that answer," Jungkook said, voice shaking, "and I don't think Taehyung was either." "I know," Jimin whispered. "Why did you say my name?" There it was. The question that had been waiting behind all the noise. Jimin walked to the kitchen, poured water, didn't drink it. He kept his back turned when he answered. "Because when I'm alone and everything's falling apart, your voice is the one I still hear, telling me I'll be okay, even if we don't talk, even if I hate you sometimes, I still believe you." Jungkook stared at him, not blinking. "And Taehyung?" Jungkook asked. Jimin turned around. "Taehyung is the one I love without needing to trust, because with him I'm never safe but I'm always seen." The sentence hung there. Jungkook stood up. "I wish you hadn't said anything," he said quietly. Jimin looked down. "I know. But I'm glad you did." He walked to the door. Before leaving, he paused. "We broke something tonight, didn't we?" Jimin didn't look up, or we finally told the truth. Taehyung didn't return to the hotel that night. He watched the sunrise from the Williamsburg waterfront, his phone still in his hand, still no reply from either of them. He wasn't jealous. That would be too easy. What he felt was more complicated. Because Taehyung had trusted Jimin too, but never expected him to choose. And now that Jimin had, everything felt quieter, and not in a peaceful way. The silence felt permanent. The next morning, headlines exploded. Jimin names Jungkook as most trusted member, fans in shock. Where was Taehyung after the Fallen incident? The silence is deafening. Truth or betrayal? BTS faces new emotional divide on live TV. Armies were split. Some cheered for Jimin's honesty. Some cried for Taehyung's absence. Some posted theories. But none of them knew what had really broken behind that single sentence. And none of them could have predicted what Jimin would do next. Because while the world was busy choosing sides, Jimin was preparing to disappear. By the time the morning light seeped through the Manhattan skyline, Jimin was already gone. No calls, no messages, no note, just an empty room, a cold cup of coffee, and a schedule card torn clean in half. The staff panicked, then whispered. Jungkook didn't. He simply stood at the door of Jimin's suite, staring into the dimness that still smelled faintly of cologne and quiet exhaustion. He didn't ask where Jimin went, because deep down, he already knew. When someone leaves without warning, it's rarely random. It's an act of self-preservation. And Jimin, for once, had chosen to save himself before anyone else could ask him to perform again. Jungkook turned his phone face down. It had been vibrating non-stop, calls from managers, messages from producers, fans flooding his inbox with screenshots of Jimin's answer. "You're the one he trusts the most." One caption said, "Protect him," Jungkook said another. But every word felt like a bruise pressed too hard. Trust, that word didn't feel beautiful anymore. It felt like a spotlight burning holes through his skin. It wasn't meant for him, not this way. He sat on the floor beside the bed, hands clasped tightly, eyes fixed on the city outside. He could see the reflection of the night before looping in his mind like a broadcast he couldn't turn off. The way Jimin looked at him before answering, the way Taehyung looked away after hearing it, and that pause, that eternal second when the truth was out and the air had shifted. It was like watching a door close between three hearts that had once beaten in sync. Meanwhile, Taehyung was in another part of the city, sitting at a piano in a small rehearsal studio. No cameras, no stylists, no audience, just him, his reflection, and the faint echo of his own breathing. He pressed a single key, a minor, and let it linger until the sound decayed into nothing. His reflection blinked back at him ghost-like. He whispered under his breath, "He chose you, Jungkook." The words tasted strange, not bitter, not envious, just foreign. Like trying to pronounce a language you once knew but had forgotten. He played again, softer this time, but his fingers trembled. "He chose you," he said again, more to the reflection than to the empty room. Behind him, his phone buzzed. He didn't check it. He didn't need to. He knew it was Jimin. Jimin was gone, and Jungkook wouldn't know what to say, because when trust is declared publicly, it changes everything privately. It rewrites boundaries. It builds walls where there were none. It creates a new kind of distance, the kind that feels polite on the outside and unbearable on the inside. That afternoon, the label released a short statement. "Jimin will be taking personal time to rest following international schedules. We ask for understanding and respect for his privacy." It was a clean message, professional, polished, empty. The world read it and moved on, but for Jungkook and Taehyung it read like a final goodbye wrapped in formality. Jimin had gone to the coast. Not far from the city, but far enough for silence to exist. He walked barefoot along the shoreline, hoodie drawn over his head, the waves folding against his ankles like slow apologies. He hadn't cried, not yet, but his chest felt tight, full of everything unsaid. The question from Jimmy Fallon replayed again and again, not as a memory, but as an echo that refused to fade. Who do you trust more? He didn't hate the question, he hated how easily the truth had slipped out. Because his answer wasn't meant to hurt anyone, it was meant to protect something fragile, something he thought had already been lost. He whispered into the wind, "I didn't mean to choose." A gull screamed overhead, and for a brief moment he almost smiled. He sat on a rock near the water's edge, phone in hand. One unread message blinked from Jungkook. "JK, are you safe? Just tell me that, I don't need anything else." He typed, deleted, typed again, deleted again. What could he possibly say? "Yes, I'm safe, but I broke something sacred," or "I didn't want to hurt him, but I did anyway," or "Maybe I'm sorry for saying your name when I should have stayed silent." He turned off the phone and watched the horizon instead. The sea was gray, like bruised glass. Somewhere behind that line, the world continued, loud, bright, chaotic, but here it was just him, his breath, and the guilt that refused to let go. That night, Jungkook found himself on the studio balcony, New York lights flickering below like scattered constellations. He tried recording earlier, but every take came out wrong. His voice cracked where it shouldn't, the rhythm uneven, the emotion too raw to control. He gave up. Instead, he watched the skyline and whispered into the air, "You always disappear when I start to understand you." He didn't expect an answer, but the wind carried the sound of his own words back to him. It almost sounded like Jimin's voice. Almost. He pressed his palms against the cold railing, remembering that first time Jimin ever said he trusted him. Backstage years ago, after a mistake on stage that nearly cost Jungkook his confidence. Jimin had found him crying quietly in the dressing room and without saying much had just said, "I trust you more than I trust myself right now." That was all, simple, unforgettable. And now, years later, that same sentence was haunting them all. Because trust doesn't just connect people, it divides them too. When one is chosen, someone else is left unchosen. And that's a wound that never truly closes. In the days that followed, fans flooded the internet with theories, edits, and letters. Some said the trio would reconcile. Others said the bond had finally cracked under years of pressure. But none of them knew the truth that Jimin wasn't hiding from fame but from the echo of his own honesty. He had once said in an interview, "The hardest thing about love isn't saying it, it's living after you've said it." Those words resurfaced online now, quoted under clips of the Fallen interview set to slow piano music. And maybe that was fitting because this wasn't a scandal. It was something far more human, a moment of truth spoken too clearly, too soon in a world that prefers silence. Back in Seoul, Namjoon watched it all unfold on his tablet. He sighed, turned it off, and looked out his window. He'd seen this before, not the fame, not the headlines, but the way truth can turn into a wound. He whispered to no one in particular, "The problem with honesty is that it doesn't wait for timing." And across the ocean in a quiet coastal town, Jimin finally cried, not because of what he'd said, but because of what he could never unsay. The waves swallowed the sound. The night mercifully did not. The rain came without warning that morning, thin at first, then heavy enough to erase the horizon where the sea had been. Jimin stayed seated on the same rock as the day before, his hood soaked, his breath pale against the wind. He didn't move, he didn't even try to find shelter. For the first time in months, no one was watching him. No cameras, no handlers, no eyes calculating how fragile he looked. He could finally be still. He remembered something Jungkook once said during a late-night drive in Busan years ago. "When it rains, people think the world's sad, but maybe it's just cleaning itself." Back then, they were both laughing, shouting over the sound of the sea, their voices young and reckless. Now the words felt prophetic, because everything inside him needed cleansing. He took out his phone again. The lock screen still showed a picture of all 7 of them together. Their smiles looked untouchable, frozen in time. He pressed his thumb over Jungkook's face, then Taehyung's, tracing both like a prayer. His thumb trembled when the screen dimmed to black. The next notification came from an unknown number. It wasn't text, just an audio file titled Brooklyn Draft, MP3. He hesitated, then pressed play. The sound that followed was soft, hesitant piano keys, a melody that faltered halfway through, and then Taehyung's voice low, almost whispering. "This isn't a song, I just needed to remember what silence sounds like." Jimin's eyes stung. He recognized that piano, that tone, that hurt. Across the ocean, Jungkook sat inside HYBE's empty rehearsal room, staring at his reflection in the mirror. He just landed that morning, no cameras, no press. He didn't tell anyone he was back. He had a hoodie pulled tight and eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. Every sound in the room echoed, the hum of lights, the creak of floorboards, as if the building itself remembered what had happened on that show. He tried dancing, but every move felt wrong. His body didn't follow, his mind was elsewhere. Every beat reminded him of Jimin's voice on stage, steady, unflinching, too sincere for TV. He stopped mid-step, leaned his forehead against the mirror, and whispered, "You shouldn't have trusted me that much." Behind him, the door creaked open. Namjoon walked in quietly, carrying 2 bottles of water. He set one down beside Jungkook. "You know, he didn't mean it like that." Jungkook didn't look up. He meant it exactly like that. Namjoon sighed. "Then maybe you should stop punishing yourself for being chosen." "I didn't want to be chosen," Jungkook said, his voice cracking. "I just wanted us to be okay." Namjoon sat beside him, watching the reflection of the 2 of them. "Trust is complicated, Kook. It's not always a reward. Sometimes it's the heaviest responsibility someone can hand you." Jungkook nodded slowly. "Yeah, and I think I dropped it." Namjoon didn't answer. He knew that kind of guilt too well. Meanwhile, Taehyung hadn't gone home either. He'd checked into a quiet guest house in Jeju, renting a small room that smelled of salt and pine. The owner didn't recognize him or pretended not to. That small mercy allowed him to breathe. He played that same broken melody again on an old upright piano by the window, its ivory keys chipped, its sound uneven. But this time he didn't record it. He just played until the pain turned into sound and the sound faded into memory. He thought about the years between them, how trust and love often blurred together until one hurt like the other. He thought about Jimin's trembling voice, Jungkook's silence, his own stillness. It was strange how people who loved each other so deeply could end up hurting each other without meaning to. When he finally stopped playing, he said softly to the empty room, "You didn't have to choose me, Jimin, but you didn't have to choose at all." 2 weeks later, the fandom was still dissecting every second of that interview. Editors froze screenshots of Jimin's face mid-sentence, pointing out the micro-expression between the words trust and Jungkook. Some claimed it was relief, others said regret. But none of them knew what happened next because the reunion was already being arranged behind closed doors. The company needed a response, something to stabilize the narrative. A joint interview, neutral, calm, rehearsed. When Jimin received the invitation, he stared at it for a long time. The location read, Seoul, HYBE Studio A, the same room where their first group practice had taken place years ago. He almost declined, but something in him whispered that maybe this was how healing began, not through distance, but confrontation. The day of the reunion was cloudy. Jimin arrived first, dressed simply, hair tucked under a cap. The moment he stepped inside, the smell of polished wood and faint perfume brought back everything he'd tried to bury. Jungkook was already there, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a water bottle between his hands. He looked up when the door opened but didn't stand. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jungkook broke the silence. You disappeared. Jimin swallowed. I needed to think. About what? Whether honesty was worth the fallout. Jungkook nodded slowly. Was it? Jimin's voice wavered. I don't know yet. The door opened again. Taehyung stepped in quietly, wearing black from head to toe, his expression unreadable, but his eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. He didn't say hello. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to make the air tremble. 3 of them in one room again. The silence wasn't heavy, it was holy. After a long pause, Jimin whispered, I shouldn't have said anything. Taehyung shook his head. No, you should have, it's just that truth doesn't know how to arrive gently. Jungkook looked at both of them, his jaw tightening. So what now? No one answered. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled, low and distant, like an echo of everything they hadn't said. That night, after everyone left, Jimin sat alone in that same room. He touched the floor where the sunlight fell, warm and soft. For the first time, he didn't feel guilt, just gratitude that something so fragile had survived being broken. He whispered to the empty air, maybe trust isn't about choosing, maybe it's about staying. And in that quiet, it felt like both Jungkook and Taehyung heard him, even if they were miles away. The lights above the HYBE conference room buzzed faintly, their glow sterile and far too bright for the conversation that was about to unfold beneath them. It wasn't a press event, it wasn't an interview, it wasn't even a reunion. It was something rawer, quieter, a closed-door reckoning. 3 chairs, 1 table, no cameras, no scripts, just the silence between 3 men who used to speak without words. Jungkook arrived first. He had cut his hair shorter since their last meeting, as if shedding the weight of what had been said. His hoodie hung off his frame, the color faded like something loved too long. He walked in with quiet steps, hands in pockets, and didn't sit right away. He just stood by the window watching Seoul bustle below like none of this mattered to the outside world. Taehyung came in second. He didn't look at Jungkook. He didn't have to. His body language said everything, guarded shoulders, tired eyes, lips pressed shut like someone who had memorized his own silence. He sat, legs crossed, fingers tapping against his knee in a rhythm no one else could hear. And then Jimin entered. The door opened gently, but the atmosphere cracked open like thunder. His gaze swept the room once, registering every shift of breath, every unspoken resistance. Then he lowered himself into the last chair. No one moved. The silence was excruciating. Until Jimin, voice hushed but deliberate, said, I didn't ask for this meeting to fix things. I asked for it so we could stop pretending they're not broken. Jungkook flinched. Taehyung closed his eyes. The words hung there like glass between them, too fragile to touch, too dangerous to ignore. Jimin continued, I said something on television that wasn't meant for television, and I hurt you both, I know that. No, Jungkook interrupted, voice low. You didn't hurt me with the answer, you hurt me with the silence that came after. Jimin turned to him, because I didn't know how to talk to you when the truth made you the reason someone else walked away. At that, Taehyung finally spoke. I didn't walk away because he said your name. I walked away because I realized mine was never going to be spoken. His voice didn't tremble, it didn't need to. Because some truths are heavy enough to fall like stones, not tears. Jungkook opened his mouth to speak but closed it again. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't feel like guilt or defense. I never wanted you to choose, Taehyung added. I just thought we were past the point where choices like that still mattered. They always matter, Jimin said quietly, even when we pretend they don't. Outside, a truck rumbled past the building. Inside, the weight of years pressed on their lungs. Jungkook stepped forward, pulled out his chair, and finally sat down. "I've been trying to carry your trust," he said to Jimin, "like it's something precious, but it feels more like a mirror. Every time I look into it, I only see who I used to be, not who I am now." Jimin didn't blink. "That's because you're not supposed to carry it, you're supposed to walk beside it." Taehyung's jaw tightened. "And where does that leave me?" Jimin turned to him, his eyes glassy but unwavering. "It leaves you exactly where you've always been, at the center of everything I don't know how to hold." The sentence split the room in half. Because that was the truth. Jimin trusted Jungkook like gravity, unspoken, foundational, but Taehyung was the chaos, the fire, the heartbeat too unpredictable to place faith in but too powerful to ignore. And for all the love they'd shared, it had never been safe. That's why he didn't choose him. That's why it hurt. Days later, Jimin returned to the dance studio, the one with the long mirror and scuffed floorboards that remembered every routine they'd rehearsed, every tear they'd hidden. He stood in the center, stretched his arms, and began moving slowly, not performing, just breathing through motion. His reflection followed, not perfectly, but close enough. And then behind him, footsteps. Taehyung. He didn't say anything, he didn't ask to join. He just stood behind Jimin and watched, eyes soft, expression unreadable. After a few minutes, he took off his coat and began mirroring the movement. No music, just the sound of feet sliding and breath sinking. And for a few moments, they danced not as idols, not as men with bruised hearts, but as souls trying to understand each other again. Jungkook walked past the studio door that night. He saw them, just a flash of movement through the glass, and paused. His hand hovered on the doorknob. But he didn't go in. He turned away because sometimes letting someone else reconnect is an act of love too. That evening, Jimin uploaded a short message to Weverse. It read, "I'm learning that trust isn't a line you draw, it's a circle, and sometimes it takes time for everyone to come back inside it." Fans around the world read it, screenshot it, cried over it. But Taehyung didn't comment. Jungkook didn't repost. Because they were still inside the circle, just standing in different corners of it. And for now, that was enough. Jungkook sat on the rooftop of HYBE's old building, legs dangling over the edge like he had nothing left to hold on to. The wind was gentle tonight, cool, not cold. He liked that. Soul shimmered beneath him like a city of secrets, each light a story someone would never tell. He pulled his hood tighter, letting the breeze thread through the ends of his sleeves and the gaps between his fingers. That rooftop had once been their hideout, the place they ran to when the world below demanded too much too fast. He remembered the first time he brought Jimin here, how they'd both laughed over soggy convenience store ramen, watched the stars flicker between clouds, and dared each other to dream of something beyond stages. That memory hurt now, not because it was lost, but because it was untouched, untainted, before truth ruined everything. He thought about going back downstairs, about texting Jimin, about calling Taehyung, but the weight in his chest told him not to. Because even when three people love each other deeply, someone is always outside the warmth. And this time it was him. Taehyung wasn't sleeping either. He lay sprawled on the studio floor, an old throw blanket pulled up to his chin, his phone buzzing intermittently beside him. He didn't check it, didn't want to know what social media was saying now. The world had fallen into theories again. Are VMIN healing? Where is Jungkook now? Is BTS friendship only performance? He hated how fast people tried to interpret pain into hashtags. Earlier that day, Jimin had sent him a voice memo, just 27 seconds long. Taehyung had listened to it 7 times. Not because of what Jimin said, but how he said it. "You don't have to forgive me yet, but I hope you'll stay." There were no tears in his voice, just fatigue, and a quietness that was worse than crying. It was the kind of voice someone uses when they've already accepted your answer, even if it breaks them. Taehyung played it again and whispered to the dark, "I never left." Jimin sat cross-legged in his bedroom. The lights off, the moon spilling silver onto the floor like spilled milk. He had a notebook in his lap, half full of lyrics that might never become songs. His handwriting had grown shakier over the weeks. He wrote a single line and stopped. "Even when I call your name, I don't know what I want you to say back." He stared at it, drew a line through it, then wrote it again. He missed Jungkook, that was the truth. But it wasn't the kind of missing that demanded presence. It was the kind that hurt because the person was still near, just emotionally miles away. And he missed Taehyung, but that missing was different. With Taehyung, it felt like staring at a painting you used to understand and now no longer recognize. He lay back on the floor, eyes open to the ceiling, and let the silence press down like gravity. He wondered if any of them were okay. Namjoon called Jungkook the next morning. "You need to see him." Jungkook's voice cracked. "Who?" "You know who." There was a pause. "I'm not ready." "You're never going to be ready," Namjoon replied, voice calm, "but you're needed." The same day, Taehyung stood in a recording booth, headphones off, listening to the playback of a track he'd left unfinished. It was ambient, dreamlike, barely lyrics, just the swell of strings and keys and emotion. He closed his eyes. He imagined Jimin humming quietly beside him. He imagined Jungkook's harmony, faint and hesitant, slipping under his own voice. He imagined what they used to sound like. And it hurt, because it didn't sound like that anymore. That night something shifted. Not through words, but action. Jungkook showed up at the studio. He didn't tell anyone. He brought a flask of warm barley tea, the kind Jimin always used to request after dance practice. He stood at the door to the recording room where Taehyung was still sitting in silence. They locked eyes. Taehyung didn't smile. Jungkook didn't speak. He just walked forward and placed the tea down. Then sat. No apology. No explanation. Just presence. And Taehyung, after a long pause, nodded. Not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement. That was enough. Jimin received the photo later. A blurry shot. 2 cups. One untouched. One half empty. And the caption, "We didn't talk, but we were there." Jimin stared at it for a long time, the breath in his chest catching. He wrote back only one word. "Thank you." Then he closed his eyes and wept into his hands, not because everything was healed, but because something finally had stopped bleeding. The world didn't notice the shift, but something had realigned. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough. Because sometimes love doesn't roar. Sometimes it just returns quietly. Like tea left warm. Like 2 people sharing silence. Like a trust that didn't die. Only got lost and then found its way home. Jimin sat alone in the practice room long after the others had left. The wooden floors beneath him still echoed with faded choreography, movements carved into muscle memory. He was cross-legged near the mirrored wall, head resting against the glass, eyes half closed. A playlist played softly in the background, instrumentals without words, because he couldn't bear lyrics right now, not when his life already felt like one long unsung verse. The day had passed quietly, the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, just tense, a held breath, a silence waiting to be filled but never was. Earlier, he and Taehyung had met in the hallway. They didn't speak, but their eyes did, a nod, a glance. Then they both kept walking as if conversation might risk the fragile thread slowly stitching itself between them again. And Jungkook had passed by the room once. Their eyes had met through the studio glass. Jimin had smiled first, Jungkook had smiled back. But he didn't come in. And that said more than any words ever could. Taehyung spent the evening in the corner room of a quiet cafe tucked between 2 art galleries in Itaewon. The kind of place where no one looked up, no one asked questions, and the espresso always tasted like memory. He flipped through an old notebook, one he hadn't opened in years. On page 12 was a sketch of Jimin's hand. He had drawn it once back when they'd spent entire nights in the dorm just talking, laughing, dreaming about life beyond tour buses and spotlights. He remembered how still Jimin had stayed for that drawing. How the silence between them back then had been the good kind, the warm, trusting kind. Now it was the cold kind, the kind built from everything they hadn't said in time. A soft ding at the cafe entrance pulled him from the memory. It was Jungkook. It was Jimin. It was just a stranger with tired eyes. And still, he felt himself deflate, because some part of him still hoped one of them would follow. Jungkook walked home in the rain without an umbrella. Seoul's streets were slick and glowing, headlights reflecting like stars fallen to pavement. He didn't rush. He wanted to feel the water, let it soak into his hoodie, let it chill his skin. It made him feel alive, raw in a way that applause never did. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't check it right away. When he finally did, he saw Jimin's name. No message, just a missed call. He stopped walking, looked up at the sky, and for the first time in days, he exhaled something close to relief, because a missed call was still a call, a crack was still a way in. He stood there, soaked and shaking, with a ghost of a smile on his lips. Then he called back. It rang once, twice. Voicemail. He stared at the screen, water dripping off his nose. Then he recorded something, his voice low, real tired. You don't have to explain, you never did. I just wanted to say, I miss who we were when it was easy to laugh. He pressed send. No overthinking. Just truth. Jimin got the voice memo while curled in bed, the blanket pulled up to his ears. His face was bare, no makeup, no mask, just him, just the soft light of a single lamp glowing against the night. He played it. Once. Twice. He cried the second time. Not loudly. Just quietly, like something breaking very slowly under too much pressure. Because Jungkook didn't say, I forgive you. He didn't say, let's go back to the way we were. He didn't demand anything. He simply offered the one thing Jimin had needed from the beginning, understanding. Taehyung returned to the dorm late. He passed Jimin's door, then paused. He stared at it like it held a secret he wasn't ready to open, then he raised his fist, let it hover for a moment. He didn't knock. Instead, he walked to the rooftop. Minutes later, Jimin joined him there like instinct, like muscle memory. They stood together in the wind, neither looking at the other. Then Taehyung said, I kept thinking I wanted you to choose me. Jimin didn't reply. But maybe, Taehyung continued. What I really wanted was to know that not being chosen didn't mean I was lost to you. Jimin's breath caught. He nodded slowly, then whispered, you never were. They didn't cry. They didn't hug. They just stood in the rain, closer now than they'd been in weeks, letting the wind say what they couldn't. The next morning, Jungkook walked into the practice room, holding 3 coffees. One for himself, one for Jimin, one for Taehyung. He set them down without a word. Jimin arrived 10 minutes later, eyebrows raised, lips pressed into a smile. Taehyung came last, nodding silently as he took his cup. They didn't rehearse that day. They just sat in the middle of the room, talking, laughing softly, letting the warmth back in. No apologies, no performances, just realness, just recovery. Outside, the city kept spinning. Inside, something had finally slowed down enough to heal. And in that moment, even without cameras or captions or hashtags, they felt like themselves again. Not perfect, but present. The sound of soft laughter drifted down the hallway of the practice building, faint and fleeting, as if unsure whether it belonged here. But it did. For the first time in weeks, the 3 of them were in the same room, together, not because they were scheduled to be, not because the cameras demanded it, but because they wanted to be. Taehyung leaned against the wall, coffee in hand, watching Jimin mime an exaggerated version of a dance move Jungkook had messed up months ago. Jungkook laughed, not his public laugh, the one that was bright and polished and designed for shows, but the kind of laugh that cracked through silence like sunlight through blinds. Unfiltered, familiar. There were no scripts in the room, no music, no choreography sheets. Just them, just space, just enough safety to breathe. And it felt good. Not fixed, not flawless, but real. That afternoon, after the laughter had faded into quiet, Jimin sat on the studio floor with his back against the mirror. He was sipping the last of his lukewarm coffee, legs stretched out in front of him, eyes drifting across the ceiling as if reading the air. Taehyung sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders brushed when they leaned. Jungkook lay on his back, arms folded behind his head, staring up like the white panels above held answers to questions none of them had asked yet. I used to think that if I just told the truth, everything would be better, Jimin said softly, almost to himself. Jungkook's voice was quiet. You did tell the truth. Yeah, Jimin replied, but maybe I was also trying to protect something, or someone, maybe both. There was a long pause. Then Taehyung said, sometimes the truth doesn't protect anyone. Sometimes it just burns down the lie we were all trying to live in. Jungkook chuckled faintly, and now we're just standing in the ashes. No, Jimin said, now we're building again. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full with everything they had carried and everything they were finally setting down. Later that week, they agreed to do a short-filmed segment, nothing major, just a quiet sit-down for fans. No scripted questions, no controversy, just reflection. The producers were nervous. The staff tiptoed. But the three of them walked in with an energy that no one expected, mature, present, still a little raw, but grounded. They sat on a couch together. Jimin in the center, Taehyung to his left, Jungkook to his right. When the cameras rolled, the first words came not from the interviewer, but from Jungkook. "I think we forgot that trust isn't something you prove once, it's something you keep choosing every day, and sometimes we forget to choose it." Taehyung nodded, "And forgiveness isn't a performance, you don't owe the world a scene." Jimin glanced at them both. "I just hope we remember that silence doesn't always mean absence, sometimes it's just recovery." The interviewer sat quietly, no follow-ups, no need. Because the fans watching didn't need another scandal. They just needed to know the love was still there. And it was. Changed perhaps, weathered, but intact. That night, Jimin visited the rooftop again. This time he wasn't alone. Taehyung was already there, sketchbook open, pencil gliding across the page. Jungkook joined them moments later, a bag of steamed buns in one hand, 3 paper cups of hot tea in the other. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. They just sat watching the lights, sharing the warmth, and letting the quiet be a comfort, not a curse. On social media, fans noticed the shift. A behind-the-scenes clip showed Taehyung adjusting Jimin's mic with a faint smile. A photo leaked of Jungkook resting his head briefly on Jimin's shoulder between takes. No one commented officially, but the internet whispered its relief. They're okay. They're together. They found their way back. And the truth, they were still healing. Still learning how to be 3 parts of a whole that had cracked. Still choosing every day not to let that crack grow wider. Still figuring out how to stand in the same room without the past screaming through the walls. But they were here. And that was enough. Forgiveness didn't come in one grand moment. It came slowly. In shared glances. In past coffee cups. In late-night voice memos. In dance steps that fell back into sync without effort. No big declaration. No final confrontation. Just in presence. Which in the end was its own kind of love. The sky above Seoul that evening was streaked with soft orange, like a watercolor someone had forgotten to finish. It was quiet, too quiet in the rehearsal room as the 3 of them sat on the floor, Jimin, Taehyung, Jungkook. No cameras, no stylists, no agendas, just stillness and the distant sound of traffic far below. They were in a triangle, knees nearly touching, eyes uncertain but unafraid. The conversation had already happened days ago, the real one. The one with shaking voices, long pauses, and truths too tender to be said directly. But now there was nothing left to defend, only space left to share. "I think we made it through," Jimin said quietly, breaking the silence without shattering it. Taehyung nodded, his gaze focused on the scuff mark in the center of the room, the one that had been there since their debut days. Barely. Jungkook chuckled, running a hand through his hair. Is barely still considered surviving? "I think so," Jimin said, "as long as we're here." And they were finally. Earlier that morning, they had rehearsed together for the first time in weeks. The track wasn't new, it was an old song, something nostalgic, something that held the memory of stages they had once ruled as a unit. The muscle memory was still there. Their bodies moved like they remembered each other, not perfectly, but with care, with intention. At one point during a pause, Jungkook glanced at Jimin and said, "Your timing's off." Jimin grinned, "Your footwork's late." Taehyung walked between them, "You're both rusty." They all laughed, and for the first time it didn't feel like pretending, it felt like beginning again. The day ended with takeout boxes scattered across the floor and music playing low in the background. They had argued over which place to order from, just like old times. Jimin had insisted on Korean comfort food. Jungkook wanted ramen. Taehyung, as always, voted for anything spicy. In the end, they got all 3. Because compromise, they were learning, was not weakness, it was an act of trust. After dinner, they found themselves watching an old stage performance on someone's phone, one from years ago. The energy, the confidence, the synchronized movements. They watched their younger selves with awe and a kind of quiet grief. "We didn't know anything back then," Jungkook said. "We didn't need to," Taehyung replied. "We just believed in each other." Jimin leaned his head back against the mirror, eyes soft. That belief still here, just quieter now. Before they left the room that night, Jimin reached into his bag and pulled out 3 bracelets, thin, leather, handwoven, no logos, no brands, just simplicity. He handed one to each of them. "I made these while I was gone," he said. "I didn't know if I'd ever give them to you." Jungkook took his without a word, slipping it on immediately. Taehyung held his for a moment longer, then tied it to his wrist like a vow. Jimin put his on last. "They didn't say thank you. They didn't need to. Because sometimes the gesture was the thank you." They walked out of the building together under the fading light, steps in sync again. No fans outside, no flashes, just streetlights and wind. They reached the corner where they usually split off. But tonight they didn't. They kept walking together slowly. 1 block. Then another. Then one more. Not talking. Just staying. Because not every broken thing has to end, and not every healed thing has to return to what it was. Sometimes it becomes something quieter. More intentional. More real. When Jimin posted to Weverse that night, it wasn't a statement. It was a photo. 3 wrists. 3 bracelets. No caption. But the world understood. Armies around the globe screenshot it, shared it, cried over it. Because healing wasn't loud. It was soft. It was 3 voices finally resting in harmony again, not because they were forced, but because they chose to find their way back. And maybe in the end, that's what trust really is. Not a line you cross. Not a name you speak. But a walk you take together even when the road is cracked. Even when you almost lost each other. Even when you never say the word forgive. They never spoke of the fallen question again. Because some answers don't need to be revisited. Only honored. By staying. By choosing. Again and again.